event or if you're here to find out a little bit more about us, we're having this panel specifically to kind of like get ahead of the game a little bit. 2 weekends ago, we started traveling for Common Power Fall travel, and we were a little bit caught off guard by the kind of voters that we were being sent to by our partner organizations to get out the vote, right? Because we initially assumed that it would be more of like a get out the vote kind of momentum where we'll be just talking to leaning Democrats or Democrats. And it turns out that like, oh my goodness, no, for a lot of different reasons. Some of it due to the campaign, some of it due to the amazing candidate that we have running for us, some of it due to the timing of the year, but we are being more intentionally sent to Republican and independent voters to engage with them, to inform them, and actually, yes, to see if they're going to vote our way, because that's like more likely now than ever before. So that's to that end, though, this is still something that we haven't really done before, right? It requires a different kind of skill set. It requires a different kind of mindset as well to approach Republican and independent voters and engage them in a meaningful conversation. To that end, the Fewer team has put together a new set of training and materials and resources for volunteers to go out into the field. Because it is likely that we will be continuing to talk to swing voters who can be Republican, who can be independent, and often undecided, right? This panel here is the first of a slate of trainings and resources for you all. And it is a panel of experienced canvassers, most of them team leads, who were out there in the field 2 weekends ago in Pennsylvania and Montana and witnessed firsthand the kind of interactions that we'll be having this season. And they're here to tell you how they made it through and how they're going to keep making it through and how you can make it through too. So we're going to cover best practices. We're going to cover like what works at doors for them. And we're also going to cover what kind of mindset do you really need to embody, right, to be successful at this. So I won't go on for much longer. I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. We have the amazing Shai, Diahnna, Vanessa, and Chuck here on the call. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, as well as like how, like to what capacity they're involved in Common Power and their capacity and their experience with canvassing Republican, independent, and undecided voters. And then we're going to enter like a quick little dialogue between me and the panelists, but we're going to open up to the room for Q&A around like the last 20, 30 minutes, if that's all right. So I'm going to pass it off to, why don't you go first, Dee?
All right. Hi, everyone. Diahnna Nunez. I also go by Dee. And if you're familiar with Spanish, Diahnna works as well. Calling in from Kent, Washington, originally from California, but Washington is now home. And I'm actually really excited. I actually joined Common Power about a month ago and like zoomed through all the online trainings and figured out how to get myself to Montana. And in terms of my experience, so I actually started as a community organizer back in the day. So field operations and going out and canvassing is my foundation. But I've actually spent the last 15, 20 years leading diversity and inclusion across a variety of sectors. And I actually work in construction right now. I lead DEI at a construction general contractor here in Washington State. And so actually, these are my coworkers. These are the folks that I get to work with and engage with every day. And so this actually felt quite comfortable, or at least familiar.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dee. All right, I'm going to pass it off. Go ahead, Shai, the other person in Montana 2 weekends ago.
Hi, my name is Shai Burgos. My background with CP is I'm part of the Institute of Common Power, which is the educational branch of Common Power. I was introduced to this by the remarkable Dr. Terry Smith. And through a lot of education, I've come to find myself with like boots on the ground with Common Power. I've worked with Common Power on a couple of canvassings from Philadelphia to Nevada to now Montana and New York. My canvassing experience is within the year, but I do have a background experience as a graphic designer, freelancer, experiential marketer, and just overall MC sometimes. So therefore, engaging with different people from different walks of life is something I've had to do. It also comes in handy being an educator, understanding what's at stake and understanding how to break down a lot of the noise that people hear into ways in which people can actually access. And I'm going to pass it off to the next person on the panel. But I'm going to let you take care of that one because, as everyone knows, I am always traveling around. And as you can tell in the background, blurred or not, I am still on the go.
I love that. Thanks, Shai. Thanks for making the time to be here too. I know you're really busy. So appreciate the time that you can give us. All right, Chuck, go for it.
Hi, my name's Chuck. I live in Seattle. I've been around Common Power for about 3 years now. I've canvassed in Georgia, Wisconsin, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And I'm a team lead for Pennsylvania this year. I'm one of 5 team leads there. And we were out in the state last weekend or 2 weekends ago, and yeah, encountered some really interesting doors. So we'll get to talk about that a little bit today. Yeah, I'll pass it off to Vanessa.
Hi, my name is Vanessa. I've been part of Common Power since 2022, I believe, when we went to Georgia for Warnock's runoff. So I've canvassed in Georgia, Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and then also closer to home in Whatcom County. So I've gotten to talk to a wide variety of people. And yeah, especially this last weekend, like Chuck said, in Pennsylvania, I'm also a team lead for Pennsylvania. There are definitely different doors this year than we're used to, and that presents some really interesting challenges, but also opportunities. So I'm excited to dig in today too.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Can you all hear me? Sorry, really quickly.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I have
I'm gonna jump in
before
now.
we get started. Yeah, I was gonna ask you to jump in actually, Charles, because you're about to take off. So anything you want
Hi,
to
my
say?
name is Charles. Yeah, I just want to say that the people you're going to hear from right now are heroes. They are straight up heroes. These people put a lot at risk to hit the doors and talk to voters face to face. They're not alone doing that. There are hundreds of people in Common Power who will do it this season, and these folks will continue to do it. They didn't answer the call when Kamala was named, and they were here before that, and they're going to be here after, and that's what we do. Thank you all for leading the community on the Zoom and out in the field. D, we haven't had a chance to knock doors yet, but I hear nothing but good things. So anything these 4 people say, treat it like it's gospel. Their guidance is going to get you through the next few weeks. And of course, Ben. Of course, Ben. Thank y'all.
Love that. Okay. If you guys hear the Google Assistant in the back, because I'm in a lift. So don't worry about that. But okay, let's get into it because a lot of you are here and I'm reading the chat. A lot of you just want to get to business, just want to get tactical, okay? We're not going to stay just at tactical, but we can start there. So I think to the panelists here, I think I would like you all to just kind of describe like who are the Republican independent undecided voters that we are being sent to talk to? Because I think maybe some volunteers have an idea of what a Republican voter is, or maybe an anxiety of what voter they might be talking to. So can you all just share what you encountered in your weekends in Pennsylvania and Montana, and also coupled with that, 1 or 2 like techniques that you found worked really well at doors when you were talking to Republican, independent, or undecided voters. So that's the question for the whole panel, and I'll let anyone start.
All right. Hey, Chuck, why don't you lead Diana? I'll go and then Vanessa. Everyone cool with that?
Work-
Perfect. All right. Chuck,
works
take it
for
away.
me. Yeah, so we met a wide variety of voters, and reactions at the door were quite varied. I think one thing to keep in mind when you're knocking doors is that, you know, we're going to a house to look, oftentimes to look for a specific individual or a couple individuals that live in that home, but that may not be who answers the door. So even if we're looking for an independent voter or potentially, you know, a Republican who's Democratic leaning, the person that answers the door may be an ardent Republican who isn't all that happy to, you know, to see you. So you want to, I find, in those situations when we're knocking doors, we're likely to engage with people that may not share the same views that we do. It really helps to be a little more, I guess evasive would be the word, as to why you're at the door to begin with. So one of the things we did in Pennsylvania when we started knocking doors that were more Republican leaning, we kind of took off our buttons, our pins. We didn't wear shirts that said Harris-Walz. So you didn't get that I don't want to talk to you immediately, because people didn't really know why you were there. We also kind of, one of the techniques we typically use when we knock doors is to lead with our literature, like front and center, the picture of the candidate right there. We kind of stopped doing that. We had our literature down at our side, or if we were leading with lit, we were leading with down ballot candidates, not the presidential election candidates, because people were more willing to talk to us about down ballot candidates. So that was one strategy we employed. Another thing that I just like to do at all doors, not just doors that are difficult, is when I knock a door, I like to try to engage with that person about something other than politics for a short second. I typically don't say, you know, I'm here to talk to you about the election right off the bat. One of my tricks that I found works really well is to look for something when you're walking up to the house that you could engage that person on, kind of as an aside. So if I'm walking up and there's beautiful gardens in the yard, I'll knock on the door, say, hey, my name's Chuck. I just got to tell you, someone in this house really, really knows how to garden. These gardens are beautiful. And it puts people at ease. They feel like you're talking to them as another human being and not someone who's there to have a transactional conversation with them. There's all kinds of, I mean, look for flags identifying certain things, obviously not the Trump MAGA flags. You don't want to start there, but you know, sometimes people will have like a Ukrainian flag and it'll be like, oh, wow, I see you're supporting the Ukrainian people. I think that's really great. They are going through a really hard time right now. Anything you can do to kind of engage with the individual on a more general human level rather than just a straight political level to start. Obviously, you have to move pretty quickly into politics. You're only going to get 20 or 30 seconds at the door. But I do try to connect on a non-political level at first. And I'm going to leave it there and pass it. Who are we doing next, Shai? D?
Diana.
Okay.
D.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thank you for starting off, Chuck. So in Montana, what we encountered and how this, I think, compares to maybe what Common Power has done in the past, and definitely was different from what I've done in the past. In the past, I've primarily focused on disengaged voters or new voters, right? So you are coming in as that person that is trying to get them excited, or you're giving them information and you're kind of coming in with that kind of authority. In Montana, what we encountered and what really had us really switch up what we were doing was, this is actually a very engaged and informed electorate, right? There's a reason why they are independent voters. So you are not going to be smarter than them about their local politics, right? And you don't want to even try to get into that. And so building what Chuck said, the best intro over time that we discovered, or that I discovered, was starting off with, hi, I'm here with my friend Shai, and we're talking to neighbors about what's important to you this election. Would you mind sharing what's important to you? And then you be quiet. And that's probably one of the hardest things, is to be quiet. So something that I do when I'm standing there, I usually have my hands on something you have lit. I will do like a 5-second pause, and I will press the pads of my fingers one by one calmly to make sure that I am being quiet, because I'm nervous to be there. Now, in Montana, what we encountered was people were home. At times of day that maybe we're in cities, we might work away from home. Folks work on their land, they work from their homes, or they are, doing things. So you are technically interrupting them. But I never encountered anybody who was disrespectful or rude. If anything, they were surprised that somebody had come out this far to come talk to them. And the goal really is to come in as neutrally as possible. So if you noticed, we didn't say names. I didn't say, hi, I'm looking for Chuck, and I'm here to talk to Chuck about the John Tester. That immediately puts people it raises flags, because as independent folks who may have a complicated relationship with the federal government, why do you know my name? You're possibly outing somebody who maybe has a different political affiliation than the person you're talking to, so you don't want to put them in any kind of stress or distress. So starting with a conversation. After you say your introduction, if you're wearing sunglasses, take off your sunglasses, put out your hand, shake their hand, have them see you as a person. And that really moved people in Montana. And then you're going to come up to homes that have flags of all kinds of things. And you're going to want to work with your car team. You're going to want to work with Common Power to understand what your hot buttons are, because those are exactly the types of folks that we are talking to. So you're going to want to get in a relationship with how you feel about Trump Vance flags, about don't tread on me flags, about, what is it? The dog can make it in like 3 seconds. A bullet can make it in these seconds. Like that is the environment. But I personally never felt scared. Trust your gut, right? Differentiate your gut from discomfort. Common Power does really great about having people think about that. And then it's really about uncovering what they care about, and then starting from there. Neutral responses, because things will be said that you don't agree with, or language will be used that you are not comfortable with, or that maybe we just don't use anymore, right? Neutral responses. Got it. I hear that. Thank you for sharing. You can still be with an integrity of your own values and give space for somebody to share, so that you can learn what their values are. But this isn't a space to correct, right? You're not about what's right and what's wrong, but you can model in your response like alternate language, right? So if the issue of immigration comes up and folks are gonna use the word illegal, you can say, got it, right? I hear that. Being undocumented is a really difficult process. Nobody wants the immigration system that we have right now. And here's an example of how John Tester, right? We had a bipartisan bill. Like, you can model that, and you can do it in a way that doesn't put them, it doesn't create friction. I'll leave it there for now.
That was
That's
a
great.
lot.
But
Thank you very
yeah,
much.
thank you. Go ahead, Shy. Was it you?
I think
I
Vanessa's
can
next.
go, or Vanessa. Yeah, Philly, Montana, Philly, Montana.
Okay. All right. So Pennsylvania, yeah, D, that was really great. And we have some similar approaches there. I always start with the main issue. I think people are willing to, everyone's got a reason that they're voting, right? Everyone's got a reason that they care about politics right now, whether they're aligned with my reasons or not. It's still important to give space to talk about their most important issue because we all have one. So that's really what I led with. And I did go in neutral. I didn't associate myself with the Democratic Party, depending on the door that I went to. Some people, I was happy to say that I was out with the Pennsylvania Democrats, but typically I would say, my name's Vanessa. I'm talking to folks ahead of the upcoming election. Would you mind sharing what the most important issue is to you this year? And then give them space to give their answer. By the answer, you can typically tell which way they're leaning. Or if you can't, you could say, I've talked to a lot of people who have said the same thing. That's a really big issue in this neighborhood. Who are you leaning towards on this? Like, how do you feel? You can kind of feel it out. I definitely agree on the neutrality. I agree starting with the issue. Also, it's important to note, someone asked in the chat about Trump flags. And yeah, we're still going to those doors because the person who put out the flags might not be the person on our list. And more than that, I would say we're not just canvassing for presidential, right? So just because someone is an avid Trump supporter and really proud to tell you that they're a Trump supporter, that doesn't mean that they're not open to voting for Democrats down ballot. In fact, a lot of them really are, or they'll at least give you the time to share about other candidates. Like in Pennsylvania, we were out on behalf of Ashley Ehas. She's a military veteran. There's a lot of Republicans who that means a lot to them. And so that in itself makes them more receptive to hearing about her policies. Yeah, those would be my biggest tips. And also just, I was really pleasantly surprised by the Republicans and independents that I talked to, even the ones who were very avid Trump supporters. 99.9% of them were very kind and very polite and thanked me for being out there door knocking too, because they realize it's a big election and maybe I'm not on their side, but they still respect what I'm doing, right? So just biases aside, I think it was a much more pleasant experience than if you had asked me 6 months ago, what would it be like knocking on Republican doors ahead of the election? Like, I was pleasantly surprised. So I think we build it up to be this big, scary thing, but at the end of the day, we're all people and we all care. And that's really important, even if we're not necessarily on the same side of the spectrum. They're still, for the most part, really good and respectful people. I'll pass that to Shai.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and I will pick up on that. Yeah, all that was everything that Chuck D said, Vanessa said, I do as well. I do what Chuck does. Well, how's this? Let me start off first and foremost. When I first engage in any territory I'm going in, I do my reconnaissance. In all honesty, I do a little reconnaissance. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. So knowing the candidates, knowing what's going on, knowing what's the objective. Because what is our objective? Objective, at least in Montana, isn't top of the ticket. It's not. It is, down ticket and finding what aligns to the people. Like Chuck, I look for, something within their house. My entire family is nothing but military and service. I'm a teacher, so we do nothing but service for this country. And I lead with that. I lead with the fact that I'm an American. First and foremost, I'm doing my civic duty. You're an American too. And trying to make those reconnections right there, because kind of like what Chuck said and Dee said, hey, I'm here to listen to you and hear you out. We're both here for some of the same things. We both want the best for our country and trying to align that to humanity. A lot of times within what's been going on, it's me versus you, but it's us together. I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy the debate. So I go for it. And I listen and not answer to convince. because I tell any voter or any Republican I talk to that I don't like everything that the Democratic Party does either. And I know you don't like everything the Republican Party does. We are human. We are complex. And so should our politics. And so should our conversations. And that usually brings down a little bit of the temperature. As everyone said, 99% of the time. There will be those times in which you do find someone who is frustrated, who is at their ends with what's going on. And some of that is just being human. Like, yo, man, that sucks. I feel the same way as you do. Wow. And I leave it at that, like, wow. Or if I have something that can relate, when in Montana, we were talking about healthcare. I have aging family members. I was able to connect with a voter about dealing with someone with Alzheimer's and how to go through the system, and how my system in New York is a little different than your system, and how, in all honesty, when we take a look everywhere else, it's bad. So how can we make it fix? How can we fix it? And some of that humanity rubs off. Um, it takes a lot. It takes a lot longer than a, hey, who are you voting for? What are you voting for? It takes that conversation. It takes that, you know what, this stuff, I just want to know that you're voting. If you're voting, then I'm good because you're doing your civic duty. Because if we really want to think about it, people who vote more often are going to vote more Democratic and more liberal because they're really going to look at it. And what are the issues? Mindset. We talked about mindset. What's your mindset? My goal is not to convince you, but just to talk to you. If my goal is to you're going to vote my way, no, that's combative, and people read that. I'm just here. I'm here having a conversation with someone. And in all honesty, I just want to know for me, because I'm an American, you're an American, we're both here, and we both see what's going on. And it's that form of humanity that makes those connections across the lines. And reminding old Republicans about that time, you will see them go, yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah, you're right. See? And while I might not agree with him, you agree with him, but we can have a difference of opinion. And I leave it at that.
Thank you, everyone. I that is a lot of very useful information, and I bet a lot of people looking at this recording are gonna replay the first 20 minutes just to like jot down a lot of the notes here for techniques to use next weekend. So thank you for the panelists for giving us a crash course on what works, right? I find myself at doors almost like gauging the direction of the conversation. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people have been also in the chat, like, how do I persuade someone? How do I convince someone? The answer is that's not your job. That's not your job. No, 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 no. A persuasion, we're using it as a technique, is not persuasion as a goal, right? If American politics can be changed for the better by a stranger with 10 minutes at your doorstep, we would be living in a very different country. We would be living in a very different country. So all of the techniques that the panelists have kind of like showcased are all more like persuasion, diplomatic, nuanced way of conversation with people, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to get is rapport. You're trying to build rapport at a door. You're trying to find a connection if you can, and you're going to leave them with courtesy and kindness, because that goes a long way. That goes a long way to both de-escalating situations and to also maybe leave the voter with a better impression of Americans in general, right? I think something that I experience outright is that voters expect hostility when someone comes to their door talking about politics and representing a different party from them. I think they've been trained that politics is hostile and tense and full of friction, because and let's be honest, we as volunteers also expect that when we go out on doors, right? However, it's been a bit of like it's almost kind of like a Jedi trick in a way, when I'm at a door and someone is expecting me to argue with them, be hostile with them, push back, challenge, and I'm just like, thank you for telling me about that. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you feel that way? I would love to take this back to the campaign or to the candidate, because we're all here to serve you at the end of the day, and we would like to know what you're thinking, right? Totally throws them off track. You totally disarm them by saying, I want to hear from you. Because even though we don't agree right now, that doesn't mean that you're not worthy of being heard. So I think approaching doors with that mindset of curiosity, of I'm going to listen to you, of like, and like really challenging our own biases of like, people who vote for Trump must be stupid. I can't understand why they would do this, right? As soon as you lock yourself in that mindset, you put yourself behind a wall. Like you yourself have put up barriers between you and the voters that now you have to climb over to make a connection with. So starting out with just like, well, all right, I want to know what they're concerned about. And then from there, we'll see what we can do. From there, we'll see where we'll go. So the next question I have for the panelists here, and we don't have to go the whole full panel, but maybe a couple you can answer. I find that at doors, I have a little bit of a litmus test of like, is this conversation productive? Is this conversation working, right? Because you can be kind with someone, they can be very polite to you, and the next thing you know, it's been 20 minutes and you've just been going around in circles. You asking them, what do they care about? And they just keep talking, and you're like, what about this? And they keep talking, and then you're offering facts and they keep talking, and you haven't really moved on. So my litmus test is kind of like, if there's a wall or if there's a block, I try once. So I'm like, hey, have you thought about it like this? You know? And if they seem to be moved, I try again. But if I get blocked twice, I'm gonna try to wrap up the conversation up and move on, right? And usually I spend like maybe 5-7 minutes at a door if it's a really good conversation. Anything longer than 10 minutes, you might want to slowly extricate yourselves. So to the panelists, you know, like, what are the signals of an unproductive conversation? Like, when is it time to wrap it up and go?
I'm happy to jump into this one because I'm noticing in the chat, right? We're asking the question of, are we even talking to Trump voters? Are we even talking to folks who are MAGA, right? All of that. And the question is yes, right? That is the assignment because we actually don't know. And we don't know until we ask. And so I had one situation where we came to a house, right? These are very large properties. And this woman was out with her grandchildren and clearly had a shirt like, this woman is proclaiming her values. So I could already kind of get a sense. And it said, it was this American flag with faith and crosses. And I was like, okay, got it. I can start to get an idea, but I don't want to assume, right? I've never actually been in a conversation with this person. I actually don't know anything. And I get to, right? I want to be open to the possibility of having an amazing conversation with this person. So let's come from that place, right? And so did my intro. Hi, I'm Diahnna. I'm here with my friend Shai. We're talking to neighbors about what's important to them this election. And would you be willing to share what's important to you? And this woman responded with, I want Christian-fearing politicians in office. And I'm like, got it. What does that look like for you in terms of legislation? Right? So trying to like get her to like solidify it. And then, you know, said, well, you know, pro-life and marriage is between. And I was like, got it. Thank you so much for your time, right? You have a beautiful home, really appreciate it, and have a great day. Done, right? I'm not moving that person because those are just too big to work through. At the same time, we also had an interaction with a person who appeared male, white man, and we asked him the question, what's important to you? And he said, abortion. And we had the situation where we didn't engage that person, but we walked away actually not knowing what was important to him about abortion. Because what we also encountered is somebody might say abortion, and you ask them, oh, what about abortion is important to you? And then they're coming out, I believe a woman should have a right to choose. I believe that we, messed up when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. So there's a lot of not personal work, but you just want to be mindful of what your hot buttons are. And when somebody just says immigration, abortion, you actually don't know until you ask. And you can just ask, what is it about immigration? What is it about the economy that's important to you? So you can start to flesh it out. And to completely confirm what Ben said, these conversations last about 5 to 6 minutes. We can do this for 5 to 6 minutes because you're not alone and you've got a team.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Chuck. Sorry.
I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat about, when do we get to the point of our door knock, which is to get them to vote Democratic, or when do we mention the candidate? And I think, you have to be who you are. If you try to read a script at a door or follow strict rules about, what you should say when, it's not going to feel genuine. And I think if you can, whatever you're comfortable with, yes, at some point you want to have that conversation. I would really like you to vote for our candidates. But I think what you're hearing from all of us is you kind of got to lay the groundwork a little bit when you're talking to people that are either really undecided or are clearly Republican leaning. And if you may never have that hey, I'd like you to vote for Kamala comment from somebody who is just really in your face about the fact that they're MAGA Trump people. It's like, yeah, I don't ask for their vote. I do exactly what Shai said. I say, look, I think voting is the most important right we have in this country. And it sounds like you're planning to vote. And I think that's super important. Thank you for doing that. Have a great day. And I just move on. Yeah, I hope that kind of touched a little bit. We're not trying to say that you don't ever bring up the candidates, but you want to lay the groundwork for it before. And just if you lead with it right away, it tends to turn people off.
I'm also seeing in the chat. Thank you, Chuck, very much. I'm also seeing in the chat about, when do you, and to reiterate and echo what Chuck is saying, there is a time and a place. A lot of it is you're going to have to feel your instinct out. Every turf is different. Every turf you get and every electorate is different. There's a lot of this in which you have to feel your instinct. If you're not an extrovert, if you're not used to talking to people, then the script of, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? How's your day been? Hey, what's important to you? And then you can share some of your experiences and maybe ease yourself out of that own aspect of, well, when am I supposed to? You're here for democracy. You're here to get people to vote. And you're also here to get them to vote for the candidate and at least ask, hey, who are you planning on voting for? Because mind you, different people in different electorates have a different feeling about saying who they want to vote for. And to be quite honest with you, I am not the biggest one saying who I want to vote for, but I allow that for that person. Hey, if you care to share, who are you planning on voting for? These are the candidates I'm backing because of this. If you don't like them, I get it. And, just engaging that conversation, you can turn it, hey, I am a volunteer. I'm here just canvassing, making sure people know that an election is coming up. If you did not know, hey, there's an election coming up and there's several ways in which you can vote. Are you planning on voting? Great, awesome. I thank you so much for voting. As soon as we all get involved, we can all be heard. And then feel how that's leading in. If the person's more open, if they're like, oh, then you lead and ask. If they're like, I want to talk, you know what? Thank you very much for your time. You have a great day. Oh, no, but you're wrong. You know what? I might be wrong. You're right. I'm going to actually go and take a look and look through some more of my materials. I might be wrong. You've given me something to think about. And that is a great way of exiting anybody who wants to prove you right or prove, you know what? You've given me something to think about. Hopefully, I've given you something to think about. And if they say, no, you haven't, cool. I'm moving on. But then there are those times where you'll have like a 15-minute conversation. I'll be honest with you all. I enjoy those conversations because they prep me for the next person. They prep me for the next house, for the next territory. Because I've used a conversation with a veteran about how John Tesler was able, with his VA plan, able to help elongate a veteran's life. And I used that story to somebody else who was like, oh, I'm totally against him. But I look through your window and I see you have a Marine, you have a Navy man, you have an airman in your family. Who else do you have serving? Oh, well, my son is in the Army. Oh, you know what? My brother is in the Air Force and two of my exes are in the Army. Oh, did you know about the VA? No, I didn't. Oh, well, that was Tessa. Oh, you know what? You have a great day. And just leave it. Let them think. That is something that I as a teacher do. But being human, talking to people, wrapping it up, understanding that as we've said, hey, if this is a conversation nowhere, thank you very much for your time. You've given me something to think about. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Move on.
Yep, that's exactly it. And Vanessa's doing the God's work of answering a million questions into the chat. So give it up for Vanessa. And I think I'll hop into here too, because I do want to take like maybe a couple of questions towards the end of this panel here. And I want to just summarize, a lot of the wisdom that's been passed around in this conversation. So I think the most foremost thing, and most of you in the Zoom might not like this, is that there is no one right way to do it. There is no formula that we can prescribe you where if you follow A, B, C, D, you're going to end up feeling good about this conversation. It's just not a guarantee because we're in one of the most complex times in politics where it's both polarized and nuanced and full of potential, right? And so how can there be one perfect way to reach a voter that's going to get them to vote our way? So what we're hoping that you get from this panel is that like some of like the more common phrases that we use to just open up and invite conversation. But really what we're asking you to do is distill the themes from this panel and make it your own. And one thing that really stands out is be authentic. When we were in Ravalli County, one of the swingiest districts in Montana, one of the foremost advice that the organizers had for us is be authentic. These people can smell bullshit a mile away. Okay? If you're coming to their door thinking like acting like you're someone else, like trying to play some game, they're gonna be like, don't talk to me. If I can't trust you, how can I trust the person you're representing? Right? So be honest with your story. Be honest with why you're doing this. And I've done this today too, talking to people who have disagreed with me. And at the very least, they've respected my perspective because it was true and it was real and it showed in the way that I came to their door. And don't worry too, like, so that's one thing, right? Be authentic, and be sure that like you're comfortable speaking to why you're here and why it matters to you. The second thing is don't be afraid of messing up. Don't worry about getting every door perfect, okay? Like I'm a very experienced canvasser. I fumbled 5 conversations today. Like there were like a couple of voters that caught me off guard and I was like, I don't know how to respond to you, sir. Have a good day. Take care. And then I moved on because there's 40 more people on the list and you got 40 more tries, okay? And that's just in one day. You might be doing this for 4 days, a whole week, maybe more than one trip. You got a lot of opportunities to practice, but you got to throw yourself out there and don't worry about being perfect because you're going to find your voice. You're going to find that rhythm. I'm going to address another question, a lot of questions in the chat here about, well, what exactly do we say? What do our partners want? How do we introduce ourselves and stuff like that, right? I think this is about as far as we can prepare you. and kind of like talking points, because the rest will come from our partner organizations, right? There are very specific local instances of like a candidate wants abortion to be talked as reproductive rights. Maybe another area they want abortion to be talked about as healthcare for women and like semi-dying individuals, right? So you want to be able to give yourself enough room to adjust to the talking points and the language of the campaign and the partner organization on the ground that you'll be working with. So, so kind of like take this as more of like, how should I respond and what I should open up with, and less about like, I'm gonna say these exact words in this exact order. Okay. And then the third thing here, and we'll probably end with this, is that you're not alone. So I've seen a lot of stuff in the chat about like, well, what if I do this? What if this happens to me and all of that? And at the end of the day, you're canvassing in probably a pair, you know, like if it's a really challenging and rewarding neighborhood, you're probably going door to door with another person. You're not there talking to a voter yourself. We in fact encourage that you go to pairs doorbelling, right? You're not going to be off in one random street in the middle of a neighborhood trying to figure out what's going on and trying to like gather yourself after a bad interaction, right? That's not how we do things. So the other thing here that maybe people underestimate is the power of relying on each other. Maybe you don't have the response to this door or to this voter, but maybe when you meet up with your partner across the street, you're like, hey, what do I say next time? And maybe your partner's like, well, let's workshop this together. And then let's try it at the next door. And maybe you go back to your car after the end of our neighborhood and you're like, hey, I really don't know what to do here, right? Like this has been pretty hard. Like this has been a pretty hard neighborhood. And maybe your car can commiserate together or support each other and like, all right, well then let's do more check-ins. Let's take a break. Let's go to lunch and reset ourselves, you know, that kind of thing. And then at the end of every day, if you're new to Common Power, we have debriefs as a whole team. And that's where you get a sense of like, well, sharing techniques and challenges and to really prepare for what to do the next day as a team. What happens is that like, as the day goes on, you're going to become one of the best canvassers to canvass that specific group of voters in that neighborhood. Because you're going to be right there on the ground. You know exactly what that neighborhood cares about. Your volunteers alongside you are going to be like, all right, this is how we talk to these people here in this country, and not in this country, in this county, on this street, these blocks of voters. So you yourselves are your best resources. And that happens when you travel. Okay.
Hey,
And
Ben,
I want to
Yes,
pop
Chuck.
in and say something too after you,
Yes,
Chuck.
yes. Go ahead, please.
Chuck,
I just want really quickly, I want to touch on something you said. Sometimes you are going to encounter really tough doors, or maybe you'll get like 3 difficult doors in a row, and you start to feel like this is really hard. What Ben just mentioned, you rely on your partner, but also I just find sometimes I have to stop and say, I need a minute. I got to breathe. I don't have to race to that next door. I just got to recenter myself, get back in a good place before I go and knock on a door. Because if you knock on a door feeling agitated from the previous door you just knocked on, that's not a good way to start. So take time for yourself, take a breath. If you take 5 minutes, whatever you need to do, we're not out there to win any kind of contest for the most doors knocked on. You want to have quality interactions, and you can only do that when you're in a centered place yourself. Vanessa?
yes, so true. I love that. And I also wanted to go off. I just got a direct message about this, so this will kind of tie it in. When Ben said, most importantly, be authentic, I've seen in the chat too, I think it was Jen who said, be a good representative of the Democratic Party, right? Like we want to go to doors and have our minds changed by how nice and kind these Republicans are. And I want them to feel the same way about me. I want to be like the star representative of Kamala Harris herself. Whether they're on Trump's side, I say, you know what, voting's important. Thanks for doing that at the end of the day. But going hand in hand with authenticity, to be like so transparent with everyone on this call, I am not a political nut. I'm not even remotely a political nut. I'm just someone who cares deeply, and that's why I'm out here. And so I don't feel super comfortable going into like the depths of the question that I just got, comparative economic policies, like I just don't know that. And that's okay. So give yourself permission. We're not robots, right? It's so much more impactful to have a conversation with a human as opposed to someone who's reading a fact off a fact sheet. Not that the facts don't help, because like, please memorize as many as you can, but it's the way that you fit them into conversations is actually going to have the impact with the voter. So there's so much opportunity to have deeper conversations. They're not all going to be deep. A lot of them will be superficial. The deep ones are so impactful, and you're going to walk away like feeling so proud of yourself for having that conversation with the voter. Even if it was tough, you still learned a lot. You're more prepared for the next voter. But I would say draw on your personal experience and see how that ties in. Like if someone wants to talk about the economy to me, I don't know a whole lot about economic policies, but what I do know as a small business owner is how my costs have been changed by importing and how it's not related to tariffs, it's about supply and demand. What I do know as a woman is how my life has changed by the Dobbs decision and how I have friends whose lives have changed by it. And I think personal experience goes so much farther than just, well, did you know that Kamala Harris, not to say that the facts aren't important because they are, but I think at the end of the day, we are humans who care, and we're interacting with other humans who also really care, and finding the place of empathy between that and relieving the pressure of yourself of like, it's fine if you don't know the ins and outs of every policy that the candidate you're supporting believes in. At the end of the day, we are here, we're Democrats, we know what that stands for. That stands for democracy, healthcare, education, reproductive freedom, like the list can go on. And if you just know those main pillars, that gets you so far at the door. And the conversations that are going to go deeper than that, honestly, are few and far between. So you can handle them. That's also the pro of being in partners. My experience as a small business owner means I can talk about the economy a little bit, but if I'm paired with someone else who knows so much more, like that's great. So we can really lean on each other, ourselves, bring your own personal experience to it, and just remember that being a human and having a human conversation is so much more impactful than just reading off facts and a script, which is why the script is helpful, but I highly recommend finding your own flow, like knowing who you are at the doors and what you actually feel comfortable talking about, and that is going to get you so far and make it feel like not a stressful situation, but something that's actually really fun, even if you are talking to Republicans. So just giving you all permission to not feel like you have to have everything memorized, because you don't.
That was beautiful. Oh, that was really good. Yeah, Sha, you want to jump in on that really quickly? And I'm going to wrap us up and take questions.
Great. I want to say awesome. That was great. I will also say this one to every volunteer: go to your team leads. If you have some issues or anything, talk to us. We are there for you. We're there to support you. Also, your car teams, those are your people. They are your support. Whoever's in your car, they are your emotional support. If you had a bad door, talk to them. If you don't know, hey, talk. You are not alone in this. We are in this together. First and foremost, anytime you're walking to a door, don't get scared. You're with people. You're there with people who are there for you. Okay? If you feel anything, leave. Guess what? Someone else will go. It's okay. And also, this is the thing I will say: have some joy in this, please. We are fighting. We're going out every day. Have some damn joy. Have some good conversation. Be like, you know what? Thank you very much for this conversation. I appreciate you. And I guarantee you that person will be like, you know what? You're not that bad of a Democrat. You're not that bad of a Republican either. I kind of like you. I'll have a burger with you. And that right there is how you end it, and you just leave. But have some joy, because taking care of yourself, guess what? After this, we still have to do more work. So have some joy. That's what I'm ending off with.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. You know what, Dee? Why don't you just cap us off? Because we're just going on the panel with some last words here. What kind of last wisdom do you want to leave the group here with?
So something I like to give folks like practical. So something that I've been noticing, and folks might have noticed this on social media. So my secret sauce for me is make everything an invitation, right? Make every conversation an invitation. and then leave them with something positive. And I really liked earlier in the conversation we were talking about, right? Like, yes, they might disagree with me, but I'm still gonna back them 100% for being engaged in voting. With that, as we know, right, what's happened politically, there is so much happening when it comes to women's rights and women's autonomy. We have the potential to shift women away from maybe how their spouses or their households have voted in the past. And so what I've been doing, the thing that I leave people with is telling them, your vote is your vote. There is no law, there is nothing that requires you to tell anybody else who you voted for or what you voted for. That is between you and, you know, your polling place, or however, you know, when you fill out your ballot and you seal it. You do not have to tell your children, you do not have to tell your best friend, you do not have to tell your spouse. That is going to be, for me, one of the things that gives people, especially women who might have voted in the past against their interests, the entry point, the shift to do something different this election.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Okay. Thank you so much to our panelists here. I'm gonna wrap us up. So I've like kind of like glazed through, and I say glazed because it's happening too fast for my eyes to follow all the questions that are happening in the chat. And a lot of them are like, what do you do outdoors? Like, will we go in pairs? What are the turfs like? And all of that. These more general questions. I'm going to point you to our general volunteer training 101, 102, and 103, specifically 102 and 103 for more of like the general engagement techniques and also how to travel with CP. Those recordings will be sent out in the follow-up email. If you've registered to this event, we will also send that out. Your trip orientation, if you're going to be traveling with Common Power, that trip orientation and the recording, if you can't make the session, is going to be crucial for how your specific team is thinking about canvassing in your specific state. Because as we say, this is more general and like make it your own kind of training. But really, a lot of this depends on what you're encountering while you're there on the ground in person. All right. So make sure to check out those resources as well. I will also say this, that like this has been a super informative and also personal perspective of our canvassers here, from Chuck, Vanessa, Dee, and Shai. We also have a few more offerings coming up in the 202 training series that might answer some of the questions you have here. So I will just go over them really quickly. Coming up on Monday, right, are Harris-Walz talking points. So let's say you are talking to an undecided voter who said, I am feeling this issue, but I don't know what the party is going to do for me, or like I don't think anybody's going to be good for me, right? Well, you can be armed with some of those facts. And just so you know, having some of those facts isn't the end of it. Because as Vanessa said, you got to make it personal. You got to make it connect. So that's coming up on Monday. And then next Wednesday, on the 16th, also, if you are unmuted, please mute yourself while this is happening. Thank you so much. And so next Wednesday, we will be having a more formal training workshop on how to engage and disengage with Republican and independent voters. So some of the questions that you're asking here about, well, what do I say? What do I do? What kind of framework should I use? That kind of thing. What kind of breathing exercise should I employ between houses? So go to the session next Wednesday, okay? It's going to be hosted by Libby Nelson and Christine Scott. They're trained conflict managers and facilitators. So they're putting something together for us last minute and super helpful if you're going to be doing the last push there with voters. And then on Thursday, so the 17th, some of you have been asking, well, how do I go from their issue to like, well, this is what they should care about, right? Well, one of our amazing team leads from Team Wisconsin is putting together a workshop called From Engagement to Advocacy, which is exactly about connecting issues that voters are telling you they're feeling to the candidate that you're helping them elect, right? So we have a variety of trainings for you all lined up with more to come, so stay tuned. This will all come out in a follow-up email to you all. Feel free to forward it to everyone and anybody, and we'll keep doing this and keep you all prepared as best as we can. All right. So thank you again to our panelists. Show them some love, y'all. Show them some love. I know we're a little bit over time, so if you are free to go, if you gotta go. I know some of y'all are busy, but I'm gonna hang around, and anyone who wants to hang around with me can hang. And I'll be taking some questions, and we can chat for a little bit more after this Zoom. But thank you so much for being here, everyone. I hope this was useful, especially for y'all coming out to Montana and Pennsylvania and all the rest next weekend.
Thank you for everybody who came. Thank you. See you guys out in the field.
This was
All so
wonderful.
much.
Just wonderful. Thank you.
Glad you guys enjoyed it.
You can do this. It's a skill. It's a muscle.
That's right. You gotta
that's right.
exercise
You forgot
it.
to say it's a muscle.
Okay. All right. So yeah, go ahead and just raise your hands, and we'll take some questions. And everyone else, feel free to trickle out if
Renee,
you want to. Right? Oh, go
Renee
ahead.
had her hand up. Renee
Yes,
had her
Renee,
hand up.
thank you. You've been so patient.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thank you guys all for the great information. And it all makes sense to me. I'm a fairly experienced canvasser and have only ever canvassed by myself. So the idea of going out with other people seems like a luxury and great. But the thing it's really simple that I'm still kind of confused by is usually when I've gone out canvassing before, I'm with an organization. I say, hi, I'm Renee. I'm with blah, Dem organization. And we're here just trying to see, are you prepared to vote? Blah, blah, blah. And what I don't hear, and maybe it's because we're in different states, I'm going to be in team 3 in Pennsylvania. But I'm assuming that I'll be saying something about, hi, I'm here representing blah, Democratic state organization or something, and we're here promoting, Representative X. But it sounded like Chuck was saying he's not necessarily doing that if we're polling people who are in swing or possible Republican voter types. But that feels confusing to me, and it would feel inauthentic to approach somebody that way. So what are the first words that you're using in an example situation in an example state and district?
So, Chuck, you go for it.
Yeah, I think we have to go back to what you're most comfortable with. There is no right or wrong way to knock a door. I try to take the advice of Vanessa and lead with, hey, I'm here to find out what's important to you, rather than tell them that I've come with a mission. Because if you're knocking Republican-leaning doors and you tell them you're with the Pennsylvania Democratic Party, that door shuts pretty quickly. It's over. And if that's what you want to happen, if you only want to have conversations with people that are Democrats, then telling them that you're there with the Democratic Party is probably going to help facilitate that. But if our objective is to have persuasion conversations at the door and engage with people, I think it's perfectly okay not to say what your affiliation is, and to just tell the voter that you're there to talk to them about what is important to them, to listen. That's one of the things that really works, is if you ask a question and then just do some hard listening and people feel heard, they're more likely then to talk to you in a meaningful way about what you're there for, which is to ultimately try to convince them to go Democratic.
So in your experience, just quick follow-up question, when you've gone to the door and said, hi, I'm Chuck, and I'm just here off the street with my friend to talk to you about, how you feel about voting, more or less, like something really super generic, that doesn't make folks feel like, what? Like, who the heck are you and what are you really?
So
that would feel sketchy to me if somebody came to my door that way.
I think I'll jump. Oh, go ahead, Shai. Go ahead.
All right. So I see there's a complex question here, like how do you authentically approach the door, stating where you're from, at the same time garner some sort of persuasion conversation? I could be wrong, but that's what I'm hearing. Is
Yep.
that what you're asking?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to echo a lot of what was said before, is that first figure out what your objective is. It's like, what's your value? If your value is more about I am being a Democrat and I am valuing the fact that this is my identity, then that's how you're leading. And you're gonna have to navigate your way through having that conversation with someone and opening them up. There are different ways. If your objective and value is just to have a conversation without without being categorized or placed in a box, because I personally don't like being placed in a box of either a Democrat or a Republican. But I will also say something, and it's going to be an elephant in the room. I wear my political stuff on my skin. I can't get away from anything. I can't. So as soon as I knock on a Republican door, they automatically know pretty much where I'm coming from. I really don't have to state it, but I state it nonetheless. You know, hey, I am coming around. I'm a volunteer for the Democratic Party. I am. But what are your concerns? And sometimes that gets my door closed, and I'll be honest. I've had, hey, get up. Hey, you know what? I'm just having a conversation with you. I can deal with that because I've dealt with it. Not everyone is me. So lean toward what you're comfortable with. If someone's a little too aggressive, move on. But if you feel like you need to say, hey, I'm here representing such and such in the Democratic Party as a volunteer, you can. Some Republicans will be fine with it. Hey, I'm just trying to get everyone's civic duty in. And I'll ask the other panelists, if that's their experience as well, because we've all gone to different areas. But as soon as I talk to a Republican, they already know I'm a Democrat. If I say I'm a Republican, they're going to really not buy me. But that's just a me thing, and that's me leading with humor as well.
Hey,
And
Dan wants to say something, I think. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah.
I've been trying to compose a sentence because I feel exactly the same distress that's been expressed. We're canvassing independent and Republican leaning voters to find out what they're thinking, and we're sure that they're distressed about various things in the election. And is there any way that, so I'm from the Democratic side, but we know that this election features a great deal of thought and concern among Republicans. So we're knocking on independent and Republican doors to talk to you and to find out how we can help. So now I've identified myself as a Democrat. I've kind of put the person on the other side of the door as in a respected box, serious Republicans thinking hard about it. And at that point, if they say I'm Trump all the way, I'm as red as I can be, there's not much point in this conversation, then I know what to put down in my data when I go back to the car and end quickly and end respectfully.
That makes
that
a
might
ton
help.
of sense to me. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for, because I've had that experience canvassing, and I think it's always best to kind of lean in with honesty about who you are, but also with respect in terms of you're there talking to them voter to voter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
If you say to them, we're knocking
Right.
on independent Republican doors, and the person goes, oh, I'm a Democrat, you can say, well, give me a hug.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
okay,
That's awesome.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Renee. Thank you, Dan. Tom, go ahead and jump in, and then I want to wrap up this question before taking another.
Oh, I was going to ask another question if to reflect on what we were just talking about. I have no problem coming up and using the language that you guys gave us, which your experts recommended. I say, hi, I'm in the neighborhood trying to figure out what are most important issues for you. I don't feel like I'm hiding anything so much at that point. The question that I have is just a maintenance one, kind of. You were mentioning the dates for these coming trainings. There's one coming on Monday. Is that a week from the day after tomorrow, or is that's this Monday?
Good question. Yeah, so it's the 7th. So it's in 2 days from now. Yes.
Okay, so that's
And
one.
Jenny, I don't know if you're, yeah, if you're still on the call, Jenny, can you just drop in the link to the training page? So commonpower.org/training is where you will find these new trainings. They're on our website. You can take a look at what we're offering.
Vanessa's already dropped it. Vanessa's
you
already
got it.
dropped it in the.
Wonderful. Thank
Beautiful,
you. Thank
beautiful.
you.
All right. Yeah, Vanessa's always 2 steps ahead of the game, man. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up here, and then we'll take a question from Charlotte, Eliza, and Marianne, right? So don't assume that just because you were going to Republican and Independent doors that they're not gonna vote our way. So I think that's one assumption that that's kind of like a bit of a shock to kind of leave with that curiosity, because the reality of the matter is that, like, one, you can have a Trump voter who will vote for your Senate candidate. You can have a Trump voter who can vote for your House candidate, right? And they might vote for Trump for the presidency, but they're going to help us secure the Senate and the House in their majority. So don't assume that just because they're Republican independents that they're automatically not voting our way, because they're kind of assuming that too. They're also assuming, why is a Democrat knocking on my door? And then we're here because you know what? You might not like Kamala, but I think you might support Tester, or you might support Ehas, right? So first, don't outright assume that you're not going to get any votes from a Republican or independent door. The other thing here is that the mission is still to nudge people or inform people to vote Democrat. It's just kind of the path to get there is just more long and winding if you start out with a Republican or independent voter. So that's why the opening is the issue. The opening is can we find a connection about policy? But the end goal, if you so could get there, it's still, can we count on your support for X candidate? And if you make it to the end goal, man, you're having a golden day. If you get that one conversation, you're having a golden day, baby. Okay. All right. Charlotte, you had your hand up. I think you were second.
Hi, I have an easy question. I got the time wrong for this, and it seems like a very important session. I came at 1 instead of noon. Can you tell me where I'll find the recording? I'm going to Montana.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we'll send out the recording as a follow-up email to everyone registered for this event. So you will get it. This recording will also get sent out to all team leads. So I bet the Montana team leads and the Pennsylvania team leads at least will send this out to their travelers on the next weekend coming up. So you'll get it both ways.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Marianne? You're on mute, Marianne. There you go.
I am better. 2 things. I've been out of the country for a month, so I've missed all but the first thing. And I see that there's the https www.mobilize.us Common Power. Are all of the previous things on there?
So if you're looking for a way to catch yourself up, is that what I'm hearing? It's like you've been
Yes.
kind of out of the country, you want to catch yourself up. I would actually go to our website. So I would I would go to commonpower.org/training and look at we have our recordings of our general volunteer training on that page. So if you want to catch yourself about how do I travel, how do I get plugged in, what's the latest, go to that page for the recordings and upcoming training as well. And then if you want to do work with us, then you will find out how to do that on our website as well. So that would be under volunteer.
I'm going to
Oh,
Arizona.
then that's perfect. Okay. Yeah.
But,
then just go through your trainings and you're golden.
Okay, I have one more question, and that is, you have somebody's name on your list who's an independent or a Republican or whatever, and somebody else comes to the door and you talk to them, and how do you segue into the persons that are on your list to see if they're home and you can talk to them? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. So like what we want to engage with the person at face value, because to the points in the Zoom so far, you don't want to accidentally out someone. You don't want to accidentally turn away the voter that like you're here looking for a specific person. You really want to just engage with what you got at the door. If it's a really good interaction and I'm feeling like this is getting like this is going somewhere, this is a friendly interaction, I could get somewhere with this. Then I'll be like, well, what about the rest of your household? Are they planning to vote as well? And then if that's a positive response, then I go, well, that's awesome. My name is Ben. What's your name? They give a response. I check the list to make sure. And I'm like, yeah, I definitely have you here as a registered voter. I'm so glad we're going to get your support. May I ask if X name is also in the household and what they're planning on voting for, right? But because we're already starting out in a more contentious ground, it takes a little while to get to that point, and you might not get there at all in a conversation. Most often, I've just found that the interaction is a little like lukewarm, or it just kind of dies, and I never really get to ask if the person on the list is actually at home or not.
Or if it's a negative one, you don't get to ask about the rest of the people.
Yeah, if it's a negative one, just move on. Yeah, and mark that person not home so that maybe another canvasser will have more luck.
Okay, one more quick question. Is there certain things you want us to wear or not wear, or, you know, we're supposed to get, you know, dressed up or something? I don't know.
Hey, Ben, I can take this one because this was very much my mindset. So I really appreciate that question. If I can just quickly add, I always end my interactions with a gesture, either a handshake or a high five or a fist bump or something. And that's usually when I get somebody's name, right? And then you're with a partner, and so you can track it. But the other thing too to remember is most often you'll get one person at the door, other people will be listening, and they will come to the door, and you might get all the people on your list, because it's so like people are just so unaccustomed right now to interact with somebody in a positive way around the elections and about politics. It actually draws the rest of the household in. And then you can like figure out with your partner like who's who. And if you end it with that interaction, you will get names and you can figure it out, right? In terms of clothing, I really appreciate this question because similar to Shy, I wear my politics. There are certain things about me that I cannot change or cover, right? And I have learned that the more neutrally I can dress, and this has to be authentic to you, right? So it goes back to what's your goal? If you want people to know your position, rock your shirt. Be prepared to have certain types of interactions, and then just don't wonder why they're not going a certain way, right? As a person of color, as a woman of color, I aim to dress more neutrally. In Montana, because I work in construction, I had my work boots on, I had my jeans on, I had my flannel on, I had my high vis on, because those are my folks. That's who I work with. That is genuine and authentic to me, right? And I can walk a good amount in my work boots. So definitely wear comfortable shoes, but wear neutral clothing. If you want to aim to have a neutral, inviting conversation, aim to have a neutral clothing. I covered some tattoos that I had, right? Because I don't know how people are going to interact with tattoos, but that is still authentic to me because I know what the goal is for me.
Right. Okay.
So
I'm going to be in Tucson, so it may be really hot there. I don't know. I'm not, you know.
I'm going to add.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to add on because I wore a Harry Potter shirt and a Captain America t-shirt. So, you know, that was genuine to me. And it came up with a whole bunch of conversations between both of the shirts.
Besides,
you know, what conversations do you want to have?
I don't wear clothes with logos or words on them. So, but besides that, is there like, should I, you know,
I got you.
And a jacket's okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, do what is comfortable for you to walk 6 hours in a day to whatever climate you're going to be in. It sounds like you're going to be in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
Don't like layer. Don't wear jeans unless you can wear jeans in hot weather. I don't know who can. But T, you're special. But yeah, so definitely things that you can be comfortable walking around for about 4 to 6 hours a day, suitable to the climate you're in. And then we gave a lot of tips on like what kind of graphics, what kind of logos, what kind of paraphernalia, right? Et cetera, et cetera. But really pack for the weather and pack for things that you can layer is what I would advise.
So I'll be
We
going to
won't
Arizona.
need layering in
and-
Tucson though, will we?
So I'll be going to Arizona and I'm going to be wearing a hat, I believe. And this is interesting because we talk about the introduction or we talk about first impressions and so forth. And I came across a hat on Amazon. Maybe I can show it here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yep. Register, show up, vote. Yep, I see it.
So I'm wondering if that's something that will help the introduction or if it's sets me in a certain way.
For sure. Yeah. So
It seems like fairly
neutral.
generic. and-
Yeah. Generic vote stuff, pro-democracy stuff, pro-vote stuff, that's all perfect and perfectly fine. It's like what we're telling people is that you want to be flexible if you just happen to be in a heavy Republican or independent neighborhood. Maybe like you want like less like a shirt or a jacket that you can't take off easily and more like a hat or a button or a sticker that you can like cover up if that gets you more doors open, or like flash if that gets you more open, right? So be versatile. But generic vote, pro-voting, pro-democracy stuff is perfectly fine. I wear that all the time. See, I'm having right now. Look, I got my vote in Hindi and Asian languages, and then I got my Harris-Walz sticker, right? And I'm wearing a past shirt for B-Win, which is one of our candidates back in 2022 in Georgia. So I'm all decked out, but I also have a jacket that I can zip up. This is UV, it protects me from the sun, it's UV protection. It also covers all of this here. If I feel like I'm not gonna get doors open if they just see someone super democratic at their door, right? So be versatile.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We're gonna move on to
Thank you.
Eliza. You've been very patient. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Vanessa. I'm missing Shy. Thank you. I just wanted to pop up and be like, I was a first timer 2 weeks ago in Pennsylvania. And I had a great time. And I dressed like I dress when I work in DC, because that's how I dress when I travel. I wear my Library of Congress hat with a flag. And I make a joke. One Democrat answered the door and she was like, your hat scared me. And I turned it around because it says Library of Congress on the back. And I said, yeah, it's what I wear to protect myself when I travel. And she was like, oh, I'm like, look closer. Have you ever met a non-radical librarian? And we laughed. But I just wanted to give you hope that like, this was my first time. I had incredible conversations. I pretended I was a Midwesterner. I said I was from Richmond, Virginia, because no one wants to talk to anyone from Brooklyn. Trust me, in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And I love when Chuck said when we were there, like, stop by Target, get an Eagles football shirt. Like, that helped on Eagles Day. You know what I mean? Like, and the other thing was, I start, how's it going? What's up? I say, like, we're just walking around. A bunch of us are walking around, asking people if they're going to vote today. That's it, you know? And I always ended with Ashley Ehas. And I ended, this is how I brought it up. I love the suggestions from D, like about how, I can't remember what, but I wrote it down. Sorry, I really liked it. But I always ended with Ashley Ehas, and how I brought it up was I said, have you heard of Ashley Ehas? And every single, I talked to 12 or 16 houses. They said no. I said, oh, wow, well, she's a young person. You know, I talked about the military. I talked about the GI Bill in Oxford. So they didn't think it was a big educated woman, that she's actually used the money from the military. And I talked about what she did with the care volunteer work or whatever during the pandemic. Every single person I talked to is going to vote for her. And we just read the Wikipedia page as we drove around, and it had more information than the points. So when I drive down with Tracy, we're going to read like all the talking points, and they stick in your head. And it was great. I mean, I had a leg up because I was a salesperson for 11 years, but like it's fun. And people want to, I mean, what I wanted to say is like I'm there to connect with people. They want to connect. And which way are you leaning? I went like this, which way are you leaning? And if they want to talk about it, they talk about it. If they don't, they don't. I had 2 conversations with independents who voted for Trump both times that I will never forget. And I only canvassed for a day and a quarter. Like, so I was first timer. So don't be nervous. It's going to be great.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's no question.
Thank you, Eliza. Oh no, it's like this is exactly the perspective that other new timers, first timers also have to hear too, right? Because there's experienced canvassers, but you know, we've got time and a lot of experience to back that up. But to hear your perspective, I think is very valuable for people who still feel anxiety, right? Okay, John, we're gonna end with you. We kind of like a little bit over the mark here, but thank you so much for being patient, everyone on this panel and on this call. John, go for it.
Thank you. This has been absolutely wonderful. So I just came off of a wonderful trip in North Carolina, talking with Black voters only. And now I'm going to be moving over to Montana, talking with Republicans and independents and Trump lovers. So I can really see how everything what you all wonderfully gave us is so going to be helpful for the type of voters in Montana that I'm facing. But I'm curious if the panelists could quickly address how this might be useful for Black voters, Hispanic voters, and maybe even Native American voters if we check in with them in Montana. Sometimes I saw kind of mixed households when I was in North Carolina talking with Black voters. The male usually maybe, more, Trump leaning a little bit, but the females in the house are not. And so I'm just trying to see how, if you could talk briefly about using this material for other demographics.
Sean, I'm not sure I understand that question. If you, I'd love for another panelist to take it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think, well, first, thank you for your question. It's very nuanced and quite complex, I think. I think if I'm hearing you correctly, you're kind of asking, well, how can we use the techniques and sort of tactics that were shared in this call with other demographics, right? Like, demographics of voters. And I think my first response to that is that there are Black Republicans, there are Vietnamese Republicans, there are like Republicans, and like I'm canvassing a majority AAPI neighborhood because that's kind of the population that we need to mobilize and empower here. And it's very swing, I've been talking to a lot of Asian Republicans and independents. So I think it's a bit of a misnomer, whatever the synonym of that is, to assume that just because you're Republican or independent, that you're not a person of color. So that's one, right? I think too that another thing is that it's not so much the tactics and the techniques, it's about the themes, right? Like if I were to answer, well, how can this be useful across all conversations, right? Then I would say, yes, we are all trying to make a human connection at a door when we're talking to a voter. In some of the future Pennsylvania trips, it's 50-50 that you're going to be sent to a Democratic neighborhood or an independent neighborhood, right? You might be going from one to another, and you won't know until you ring the doorbell. And so how you approach the door, your mindset, what you use is going to be the same because you're still trying to get to the same goal, which is make a connection and see if we have their support, right? It's just a matter of how easy do you get to that destination? Whoever opens the door is going to tell you how easy it's going to get to that destination. But John, I appreciate how you asked it, which is like, well, it's about cultural awareness, right? It's a little bit about cultural awareness because the political culture in Montana is very different than like, say, the political culture of like Black voters in North Carolina. And I was right there with you, So I think we hone in more on the awareness part and not so much as like, I'm looking at this person and I'm going to assume what they are. And then I'm going to like think about how I want to talk to them based on what I assume they are when I look at them, right? So it's more about awareness. It's that like, are people being more kind? Are people being more abrupt? are you interrupting them in the middle of game day? Like, what are their values when they talk to you, right? So that's kind of where I'll leave that answer. Dee, do you want to jump in here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just briefly say thank you? Thank you, Ben. That's it. You articulated my question then better than I did. Thank you so much. That's right on.
Yeah. And John, I also really appreciate your question and everyone's question. So this is literally the conversation I have at work every day. Because I work with majority white men, white working class and college educated men, and that's who the industry has been. And what I tell them is this conversation, right? Especially the way Common Power approaches it, the way I approach it is it's about invitation and it's about leaving them with something positive. That goes across all identities and experiences. What ends up happening though sometimes, and this is going back to some conversations around like, how do you manage your own biases, or more importantly, how do you interrupt your own biases? You'll see well-meaning folks unfortunately start to use language that is not their everyday or familiar language, right? Don't pretend to be from a community that you're not, right? Don't assume that you know what kind of music or TV show or whatever that they like. And the same thing goes for white folks, right? Don't assume that you know what they're gonna like because you see a certain car in their driveway. But unfortunately, we just get those messages so much. And really what bias is shortcuts. And unfortunately, when it comes to people who are different than us, those shortcuts aren't always wired very well, and we step in it. So just remind yourself, right? Like, and I always aim for the positive. I don't know this person. I don't know until I ask. I'm going to ask everyone. And then I'm going to build a relationship from there. The other thing too, when it comes kind of like, and I'm sure Ben and Common Power will get through this in other sessions. Just because Montana is a majority white state, a lot of the electorate was older, and more than likely they have people of color or multiracial, biracial people in their families, right? People are in more interracial relationships now and are having multiracial children. And I have had these conversations with my superintendents. They look a certain way, they have acted a certain way, but the moment I get to talking about their grandchildren who are biracial or multiracial, they melt. So we have to remember that our families are changing, our communities are changing, and that's why we're here.
Beautiful. All right. And I think that's a really good note to end on here, is just kind of like remind us why we're doing this work and the very complex ways that it can be done, right? So again, this meeting will be is being recorded. We'll stop recording soon. Jenny, I don't know if you're there, if you can stop the recording, but it will get sent out to everyone after this call. Thank you again for showing up. We hope this was useful. And again, a round of applause for our panelists. And Shai, thank you. All right, goodbye, y'all. See you down the road.
Vanessa, who's